Unlike the sabbatical experience I had in 2017 when I traveled to various museums and churches in Europe, and then returning home, I attended several events in the Western states with the goal of studying historic Christian traditions and stories as depicted in art and through worship practices. This sabbatical, I hoped to focus on preaching styles and homiletical methods. Instead, I encountered a bit of a distraction as I contracted COVID on day 2 of the Sabbath time, which then took about 5 or 6 weeks to finally feel that I had fully recovered. Though I wish I had not gotten sick during that time, I am thankful that I had this opportunity already pre-planned, that I would be away instead of scrambling to find persons to fill the pulpit. And of course, with that, feeling guilty that I couldn't be with you, but also feeling guilty if I would have gotten any of you sick, or worse. So, it was a joy of being away and being sick, but also in that weird mixed blessing, thankful that at least the reports I received, none of you were catching it, and I wasn't spreading it. I was able to lock myself in home in isolation, and it all worked out. However, COVID did do a number on me, and whereas when I've been sick with a cold or a flu or perhaps bronchitis in the past, I was able to at least do some coursework, reading, watching pastors speak, that type of thing. I discovered with COVID, I didn't have enough energy to even pay attention to whatever was being shown to me or whatever I was reading. I think after I read the same page on the umpteenth time, I finally realized I'm getting nowhere. It was frustrating that instead of focusing on the goals I had established for this time of sabbatical, I was distracted by an illness, which is likely similar to the distraction that the woman in Luke's gospel is experiencing as she loses one of her coins. Unable to focus on anything else until she found that lost coin, the woman lit a lamp, swept the house, and searched carefully until she found it. Shining her candle into every dark corner of the house, she ignored everything else on the fringe of her peripheral vision until the beam of light reflected from her coin. And then, similar to when I called my parents and friends to inform them that I had finally returned to good health, the woman called her neighbors to rejoice with her for locating her missing coin. Using her selective attention, she focused only on finding that one coin, and she filtered out everything else. In her case, and in most cases, this selective attention can be a good thing, like when we're attending a noisy, crowded restaurant or a social gathering, and we're able to focus our attention on the conversation we're involved with. Yet there are times when our ability to have selective attention, where we focus on just one aspect to achieve a goal, but we do so by refusing to adapt to new ideas or even listen to new people to achieve that goal, at those times, that's not a good time, and it's not a good thing. In addition, there are events that happen beyond our control which don't require our selective attention, but our attention is directed at it nonetheless, because it's impossible to look at anything else. 21 years ago, our attention was riveted on any television screen we could find as we focused on the destruction we suffered from a terrorist attack. I recall watching and praying in the days that followed for first responders to keep finding survivors, but also recognizing there are a lot of people who won't be going home. It was a challenging time. Still, I recall we didn't get stuck focusing on the devastation. Days after the attack, I witnessed nationwide our ability to unite as we focused on each other's needs. We opened our pocketbooks. We sent as much food and funding as we could to feed people, to ensure that people were clothed. The neighbors in New York opened their apartments and their homes to strangers. And in kind, we did so closer to home. We took in the homeless, we clothed people, we fed them. And it helped us to reimagine how we care for each other. Instead of remaining focused on the devastation, we turned our selective focus on opportunities to provide healing and to provide hope. Some groups were able to focus in on a family or an individual in need, or they chose to increase the range of their focus as they provided for the needs of the larger community. Our ability to focus on the group or on the individual is similar to the parable of the man with the one lost sheep. When the shepherd was watching his 100 sheep, he kept his vision broad so he could watch over the entire flock to protect them from predators. And when one sheep went wandering off, he was able to narrow his vision to go searching for one lost sheep. And thus, while searching for the lone sheep, he lost sight of the other 99. Perhaps his friends inquired of him later why he chose to focus his attention on one lone sheep instead of keeping watch over the other 99. After all, that doesn't seem to make a good business model. Yet, as Jesus declared through the parable, the man was in the business of caring for all 100, which according to Jesus is what his mission was about, as he declared to his followers that he wanted them to operate like the shepherd. Jesus wants disciples who would seek one sinner instead of 99 righteous persons. Jesus wants faithful persons who would be like the woman with a candle, who is not distracted from her mission to look in the dark corners and hidden places for those who need found. And he wants loyal persons who willingly focus their attention on sinners and not worry about the grumbling and complaints of the righteous Pharisees and scribes. One sinner, one coin, one sheep. Zoom in on the one. Look for the one. Seek the one. This lesson was central to Jesus' ministry and mission, and yet to many, it doesn't make sense. And it can be a difficult lesson to adapt and to adopt, especially when his call to ministry requires a great cost from us as we attempt to follow him and be like him. Practicing what Jesus taught, we recognize we have to release our bitterness and envy which arises whenever we feel God is focusing more on others than on us. It seems that the Pharisees and the scribes recognized this great cost, which is why they grumble among themselves when Jesus ate with sinners and welcomed tax collectors in his midst. New Testament scholar R. Allen Culpepper suggests that we typically want mercy for ourselves and justice for others, but these parables call for us to celebrate with God because God has been merciful not only to us, but also to others. The Pharisees and the scribes wanted the spotlight on them, but God's spotlight was on some lost coin in the corner of the room. Interestingly, God's selective attention is always on those who are lost rather than those who are found. And God rejoices when one becomes found or returns to the flock. God delights in restoration. God delights in providing grace to all persons, as Jesus highlights in these parables. God places the spotlight on specific persons who need an abundance of merciful grace. And we are encouraged to delight for those who receive God's mercy, because it reminds us that God has been merciful with us. Every one of us has received God's unconditional love and unlimited grace, which is often why we sing the hymn, Amazing Grace. The words, I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. These are our words of declaration. And yet, we are reminded by the third parable that Jesus provided, which immediately follows these two parables, that there was a young man who wandered away from home. And after a time of bad investments and easy spending, the young man realizes that he was safer at home. Even if he had to become a servant in his home, he decides it's better there than to be stuck in the wilderness. So returning home, his father runs to him and covers him with kisses and hugs, and then declares that his son is home and therefore needs a celebration. When the man's other son arrives, who had been a loyal child and not ever once embarrassed the family name, he arrives home and finds the party for his brother. and he immediately becomes angry at his father. He complains that he's never wandered away from home, and yet he's never once received a party for his good behavior. The father responds to his son's complaint, declaring, "The son, your brother, who was dead, has returned home and is alive. We have to celebrate his return." And for us, that response can be jarring or exciting. It all depends on where you are in your journey and with which character in the story you view yourself as. It is maddening if we view ourselves as the obedient child who never wandered away. We never challenged the instructions we received, and we've always supported the mission even if we didn't quite agree with it. Or it's liberating if we view ourselves as the child who wandered away from home, but now we're back. Viewing ourselves as the child who wandered away from home, based on this lesson, we are welcomed home and showered with attention and love. Or perhaps, even though many don't quite think of this, but perhaps we're the father. Perhaps we see ourselves as the father in the parable with our open arms, willing and happily receiving those who have come home. And by viewing ourselves as the father in the story, we focus our attention on anyone who has drifted away from home, whether for personal reasons or because their careers, family management, and church life had become too much of a struggle to balance. Or for anyone who's experienced a divorce or separation and believed they couldn't face their church family members. We have the ability to open our arms to them and welcome them home. Or perhaps we know of persons who have been hurt by clergy with their words or actions, or perhaps there were church doctrines which prohibited their ability to be with people and to be the person God made them to be. Or they were even told, "Your gender mandates your silence." Thankfully, here in this church, we read these texts and we understand that God loves us unconditionally, and in turn would turn no one away nor silence anyone. And likewise, we love unconditionally and we silence no one. We do this because Jesus informed us that he loves everyone, and we attempt to love as he loves. We also choose to live into the challenge he gave us, which means we focus our selective attention on the lost coin, not the 9 that are still in the hand. And we go looking for the lost sheep that are wandering around, not the 99 that are safe with the flock. Seeking until found, then gathered safely here in the house of God. We rejoice that we are together. We celebrate that all of us are here, where we are reminded of our ministerial challenge, while also filled with renewed purpose and mission. Going forth, we continue to live into Jesus' instructions as we embrace each other, welcome each other, and delight in this house of worship, which becomes a home for everyone, where no one feels excluded, and where all of us can call this place our home. On behalf of God and all the saints of heaven, welcome home. Welcome to our celebration that you're home. Join us in the fellowship hall downstairs. Grab a hand if you must. Bring everyone in, because we are celebrating that you're home. And as we shine our light onto each other, let us find our family. For God welcomes us as we welcome each other. Welcome home.